The summer of 1945 in the Pacific was oppressive. The islands still bore the scars of relentless warfare, shattered huts, scorched earth, and the acrid smoke of smouldering villages lingered in the humid air. Among the captured were female Japanese POWs, young women barely out of adolescence, many trained as nurses, others simply caught in the chaos of retreat. One of them, Emi Tanaka, had spent months tending to wounded soldiers under harsh conditions. Now, fear gripped her as the Allied camp came into view. The POWs were herded along narrow, uneven paths lined with bamboo fencing. Guards marched beside them, rifles casually slung, yet eyes sharp and assessing. Emi's heart raced. She anticipated harsh words, suspicion, or outright hostility. Her fellow prisoners whispered nervously, predicting the worst: forced labor, deprivation, or humiliation. Emi's mind raced, cataloguing escape routes that did not exist, calculating every movement for safety, every glance for threat. The camp itself was a cluster of tents and makeshift bamboo shelters, surrounded by barbed wire and patrolled constantly. As the women were assigned quarters, Emi noticed the physical presence of the American soldiers, tall, disciplined, and imposing, yet moving with calm precision. There was a strange confidence in the way they carried themselves, a combination of authority and subtle courtesy. Emi had never seen enemy soldiers with such composure. It was both intimidating and, strangely, disarming. That evening, the POWs were given basic instructions and allowed minimal movement. Emi's curiosity battled with fear. She noticed the soldiers observing them not only with authority, but with attention that felt deliberate, considerate. There were subtle gestures: water handed discreetly to the weaker prisoners, quiet guidance through the camp, protective positioning during patrols. Emi's mind struggled to reconcile these acts with the terrifying expectations of captivity she had carried for weeks. By the next day, the POWs were summoned for duties within the camp: cleaning, tending minor injuries, and assisting medics. Emi expected brusque orders and suspicion, yet the soldiers treated them with remarkable respect and patience. A particularly striking figure, Private Daniel Hayes, a tall, broad-shouldered man with calm blue eyes, repeatedly ensured Emi and her fellow POWs were safe from overexposure to harsh tasks. His gestures were subtle but deliberate, adjusting a heavy load to ease a prisoner's burden, offering guidance without condescension. Emi was astonished. These soldiers, their captors, were actively protecting her and the other women. They showed interest in their well-being, yet never overstepped. The combination of authority, handsomeness, and subtle care created a confusing mixture of awe, fear, and a flutter of curiosity Emi could not ignore. Her focus remained on survival, yet she found herself watching him, noting his movements, the quiet kindness in his interactions. As the day progressed, the camp experienced a minor emergency. A stray shell hit near the perimeter, sending debris flying. The soldiers moved quickly, positioning themselves to shield the prisoners. Emi and the other women assisted where they could, yet it became evident that the soldiers were putting themselves in danger to protect them. Heart pounding, Emi felt a mixture of gratitude, fear, and an unfamiliar emotional stir. An admiration, maybe even attraction, tempered by survival instincts. Small interactions reinforced this dynamic over the following days. Daniel offered guidance on daily tasks, subtly acknowledged Emi's competence, and showed protective instincts that went beyond duty. Emi's fellow POWs noticed as well, exchanging glances that silently acknowledged the odd tension developing. Respect, care, and emotional fascination interwove with fear and uncertainty. Emi had survived battles before, but nothing had prepared her for the complexity of emotions arising from trust and subtle attraction toward her captors. The following morning brought an uneasy stillness to the POW camp. The humid tropical air pressed heavily against the prisoners, mixing with the faint scent of smoke and ash from distant skirmishes. Emi Tanaka moved cautiously through the camp, her eyes scanning for danger while her mind replayed the previous day's astonishing interactions. Private Daniel Hayes and the other soldiers had repeatedly acted with consideration and subtle protectiveness, defying her expectations of cruelty or indifference. Yet with each act of kindness, Emmy felt a confusing mix of gratitude, fear, and something deeper, a spark of emotional tension she could not ignore. The camp's routine was unforgiving. The POWs were assigned cleaning duties, assisting with minor medical tasks, and organizing supplies under strict supervision. Each day was a careful balance between obedience and survival. Emmy noticed that Daniel often positioned himself to subtly shield the women from the most physically demanding or exposed tasks. His gestures were quiet, almost imperceptible to the other soldiers, but Emmy felt the weight of his attention, a silent reassurance that went beyond mere duty. Tension escalated during a mid-morning inspection. Officers entered the camp unexpectedly, evaluating efficiency, discipline, and adherence to orders. Emmy and the other POWs felt a surge of panic. Any misstep could lead to punishment, or worse. Daniel remained close, calmly guiding them through the motions, his presence a mixture of authority and reassurance. Emmy's heart raced, aware of the forbidden dynamic between them. He was a captor, yet also a protector, his concern personal as much as professional. Later, a sudden medical emergency tested the fragile bond between trust and fear. A young civilian boy injured while scavenging near the camp perimeter was brought to the makeshift infirmary. His leg was fractured and he was pale, trembling with fear. Emmy sprang into action, preparing splints and calming the child, while Daniel assisted with both efficiency and attentiveness. Bullets occasionally ricocheted nearby, and debris from distant shelling littered the ground. Emmy realized fully that Daniel repeatedly risked himself to ensure the safety of both the prisoners and the civilians. Each risk strengthened her sense of admiration and emotional connection, even as her survival instincts warned caution. Small, quiet moments throughout the day reinforced the forbidden bond. When they moved supplies together, Emmy noticed the subtle brush of his hand against hers. When he offered water or a brief word of encouragement, the tone carried more than professional courtesy. Emmy felt her pulse quicken, caught between recognition of his humanity and the moral complexity of forming emotional attachments to captors. The emotional tension intensified as the nurses coordinated care for more incoming civilians and wounded soldiers. Exhaustion pressed heavily on all, yet the collaboration was seamless. Emmy directed her fellow POWs with quiet authority, while Daniel positioned himself strategically to shield the group from danger. Every glance between them held unspoken meaning, mutual recognition of competence, trust, and the stirrings of attraction that neither could fully acknowledge. As dusk fell, the camp settled into a fragile calm. Emmy reflected on the days spent in close proximity to Daniel and the other soldiers. Fear had not disappeared. The threat of scrutiny or punishment remained. Yet beneath the tension lay a profound awareness. These men had shown repeated acts of bravery, kindness, and human decency, and Emmy's own emotions had responded in ways she could not fully control. Respect had grown into subtle fascination, and fascination into the quiet beginnings of forbidden emotional attachment. Night had fallen over the remote POW camp, and the humid air was thick with the lingering scent of smoke from distant skirmishes. Emmy Tanaka moved quietly through the dimly lit tents, her hands steady despite exhaustion, her mind alert to every movement and sound. Private Daniel Hayes was nearby, coordinating the medics and subtly shielding the female prisoners from minor hazards, gestures that had become routine yet carried an unspoken intimacy. The tension of captivity lingered, yet each act of protection deepened the fragile bond forming between captor and captive. A sudden alarm shattered the uneasy calm. Artillery fire erupted nearby, sending vibrations through the tents and scattering debris across the camp. Civilians and prisoners screamed and scrambled for cover. Emmy's pulse raced as she rushed to stabilize a critically injured child, with Daniel shielding her from falling timber and debris. The chaos was absolute, yet they moved in perfect coordination, each anticipating the other's actions. In those harrowing minutes, the line between fear, trust, and emotional connection blurred. Amid the turmoil, another crisis emerged. A portion of the makeshift infirmary tent collapsed under its own weight, endangering the wounded. Daniel and the medics acted instinctively, lifting debris and shielding patients, while Emmy directed her fellow nurses guards, triage and emergency care. Every second carried life-or-death stakes, yet their coordination never faltered. Emmy realized, with a mixture of awe and disbelief, that Daniel repeatedly risked his own life to ensure the safety of prisoners, a stark contrast to everything she had expected from a captor. As the night wore on, the camp gradually stabilized. Injured civilians and prisoners were moved to safer areas, and temporary shelters were reinforced. The nurses, exhausted yet resolute, tended the wounded under dim lantern light. Emmy noticed subtle gestures from Daniel, a reassuring nod, a guiding hand, protective positioning, all quietly conveying concern and admiration. For Emmy, these gestures sparked emotions she could neither fully acknowledge nor ignore. Gratitude, fear, and a delicate fascination intertwined, forming the early stirrings of a forbidden emotional bond. The emotional climax arrived with the inspection of the camp by higher-ranking officers. Every nurse froze, aware that the bond with the American soldiers, if exposed, could endanger them. Daniel positioned himself near Emmy, subtly shielding her and conveying silent reassurance. The inspection passed without incident. The officers recognized the efficiency and professionalism of the camp, but none discerned the quiet intimacy developing between captor and captive. Relief washed over Emmy, and in that moment the depth of trust and unspoken connection between them became undeniable. In the following days, the bond continued to strengthen, carefully hidden beneath the routines of the camp. Shared tasks, medical care, and moments of quiet observation created a web of connection that transcended nationality and circumstance. Emmy recognized that trust and subtle affection had developed in a place defined by fear and hierarchy, a testament to the resilience of human emotion even in the most constrained conditions. Weeks later, the POWs were gradually relocated to safer facilities, and conditions began to improve. Emmy continued her nursing duties, often paired with Daniel for critical procedures. Their relationship remained unspoken but profound, glances, small gestures, and shared experiences conveying a depth of trust, admiration, and restrained affection. The camp, once a place of fear and isolation, had become the setting for an extraordinary story of humanity, courage, and forbidden emotional connection. By the time of liberation, Emi Tanaka and the other Japanese POWs had endured extreme physical and psychological challenges. They had witnessed acts of bravery, care, and kindness from the American soldiers that defied expectations and reshaped their understanding of humanity. Emi emerged not only alive but transformed, carrying with her the enduring lesson that even in war, trust, courage, and human connection can thrive in the unlikeliest of circumstances.